The first mine went off like a small sunrise, peeling armor from the refugee tug Palmetto and flinging its cargo of garden soil into a glittering halo. On UES Valley Forge's bridge, Captain Meyer Ortiz didn't flinch. "Vector 37, launch the dustpan," she said, voice steady enough to trick the crew into believing this kind of thing could be cleaned up. 10 relief fleet had jumped into Helios Gap expecting a corridor. Instead, they found a throat full of ashen combined gravity mines, each one a slick pearl that snared momentum and chewed it to heat. Mines meant hunters nearby. Mines meant the Combine had finally learned the shape of human mercy, slower ships, children's drawings taped to bulkheads, the convoy keeping tight so no one drifted alone. "Dustpan away," said Commander Jamal Whitaker. On the tactical, a wedge of scrap, 40 bonded ore pods, 3 dead skiffs, a rust-bitten water tower from some moon, unfolded into a broad, concave sail. The improvised shield skimmed forward on micro-thrusters, scooping the outer layer of mines the way a beach kid drags a net for shells. When the first captured mine detonated, the shock distributed along the flex joints and flashed out as a shimmering aurora. "That'll get us a lane," Ortiz said. "Not a highway, a lane." It was a human trick, make the dangerous thing work for you. Midway's dive bombers had done it with courage and timing. We did it with junk and math. She thought of her grandmother's photo of the Dunkirk flotilla, little boats hauling history across a gray channel, and felt the same stubborn thread tying today to then. Found family wasn't just the crew. It was anyone who believed the living still had a claim on tomorrow. "Captain," said Envoy Tyrell from the liaison pit, the tall Kestrel's crest lowered in concern. "Combined spearheads are on approach vectors, 12 minutes. "Plenty of time for a bad idea," Ortiz said. "Jamal, light the choir beacons." Whitaker hesitated, knowing exactly which bad idea she meant. "We haven't tested it in a live field. Neither has the enemy." Ortiz toggled fleet-wide. "All ships, this is Forge. We're turning the convoy into a mirror, nothing fancy, just synchronized wideband pings. Think marching band drill, watch your cue. Stay on your feet, don't poke the trombone section in the ear." Across 200 hulls, human and allied low-power transmitters pulsed in a rising sequence that chased itself down the corridor, the gap filled with a clean, metronomic thrum. If the Combine's autonomous hunters were listening for edges, heat, mass, coordinated thrust, then the convoy would give them a smear instead, a tide with no single heartbeat to target. Mines swallowed the dustpan and spit silver fury. The dustpan held. The corridor widened by a ship's width. In that sliver of breathing room, the refugee barges began to creep. "Ethics check," Whitaker murmured. "Not for the book, but for their own souls. We're using civilians to generate emissions. We're using everyone to stay alive," Ortiz said. "Proportionality and discrimination hold. We're not turning them into weapons, we're turning them into a choir. There's a difference." She believed it. Still, she held her breath as the first Combined spearhead knifed into the battle space, its hull a matte wedge whose edges drank light. It released a swarm of needlers that dove for the brightest signatures, and then stuttered, confused by the convoy's rhythm, breaking formation the way a flock breaks when a gust rolls over it. "Looks like they expected prey that runs in straight lines," Whitaker said. "We zig, they also zig." "Keep the dustpan glued," Ortiz said. "All ships maintain the count. It's just 4-4 time. You've been doing it since you learned to walk." She let herself make the smallest of smiles. Humans were good at turning complicated pain into simple beats, hearts, marching, clapping at ball games. Somewhere a child on a barge was probably tapping along. That mattered. Then the second wave arrived, bigger, uglier, carrying a dark star between them. The spearheads arrayed around the thing like priestesses around a relic. Its gravitational lensing twisted the starlight into concentric rings. "Black Sun device," said Tyrell, crest rising in alarm. "Star Lance, we do not survive that in a corridor." Ortiz saw the way the rings ate depth perception and felt her stomach drop. "We hold the lane," she said, "because that's what captains say when there's no third option. And we figure out how to steal their altar." On the forward screens, the dark star blossomed into equations meant to erase them. The convoy's steady thrum hit its next beat, and every mind still in the dustpan shivered like a tuning fork. "Brace," Ortiz whispered, and the world became roar and light as the Combine finally noticed that the humans were still singing. When the aftershocks passed, Forge's bridge smelled faintly of burnt copper. Casualty reports scrolled in, blessedly fewer than the explosion had promised. The dustpan was wreckage, the corridor jagged but open. The Black Sun device had paused its charge to reposition as if the Combine itself were curious to see why the prey hadn't scattered. "Convoy integrity at 87%, Whitaker said. "Barges 7 and 19 lost thrust. We've got them on tethers." Ortiz exhaled once, a quick prayer folded into carbon dioxide. "Patch them into our spine. We're not leaving anyone to drift." Tyrell's voice softened. "Captain Kestricraft can take some of the tow. We do not sing as you do, but we can pull." "That's why this is a coalition," Ortiz said. "Thank you." In the tactical quiet that followed, the ethical debate returned, as it always did after the noise. "We need a stronger mask," Whitaker said. "The spearheads adapted. They're waiting their seekers to ignore our metronome." "Then we stop sounding like metronomes," Ortiz said. "Humans didn't win the civil rights fights with straight lines. They used neighborhood logistics, church basements, call and response. They made the city itself carry the message." She tapped the display, pulling a draft from her private slate. "The Jubilee Jammer, variable tempo, overlapping patterns, no anchor tones. We'll feed them a living street, not a parade ground." "You want the convoy to improvise," Whitaker said, deadpan and fond. "In a minefield, while under fire." "Exactly." Ortiz toggled the fleet channel. "Forge to convoy, if you've ever clapped at a ball game and felt the whole stadium catch the beat, that's what we're about to do. You'll each get a pattern. You'll hear your neighbors. Follow, lead, trade, keep it human." A moment later, "This is Palmetto," in a woman's tired voice. "We've got kids and goats and 200 plants that don't like vacuum, but we can clap." The line filled with laughter like warm rain. Consent mattered, and Ortiz had asked. Just war wasn't a checklist, it was a conversation with the living. "Captain," said a new voice, crisp, official. "Ethics Counselor Adebayo, UN Relay 2. We're monitoring. You're putting civilians in active roles." "I'm asking for volunteers to emit low-power noise," Ortiz said. "No one's holding a rifle. We're preserving non-combatant immunity by making targeting harder." "Intentions don't negate effects," Adebayo replied. "If they become targets because of the emissions, they already are targets because they are alive." Ortiz cut in more sharply than she meant. She softened. "Counselor, I carry your book in my pocket, but proportionality includes weighing certain harm against uncertain harm. Right now, we know the Black Sun will finish charging." "Silence, then. Proceed, document consent. We'll revisit parameters after the engagement. Translation, you'll answer for this later. That was fair. Command meant carrying debts you couldn't pay right away." "Engineering," Ortiz said. "I need thrust from the bones." Chief Arjun Patel's face appeared, grease on his forehead like war paint. "Already stealing from the lights, Cap. We can give you a burst. After that, we'll be walking around with flashlights and good intentions." "Good intentions are our specialty," Whitaker said. The Jubilee Jammer rolled out. Patterns hopped ship to ship. An elderly man on barge 11 used a battered harmonica to set his rhythm. A Kestri child trilled counterpoints in a range no human cone of bone could hear, but human algorithms could count. The gap filled with wild syncopation, like 100 neighborhoods talking through walls. The combined seekers hiccuped again, like a machine trying to breathe water. Ortiz permitted herself one sip of cold coffee. The cup trembled against her teeth as the Black Sun flared brighter. "They are learning," Tyrell said. "They are waiting for entropy itself. Then we give them meaning," Ortiz said, more to herself than to anyone. She thought of Navajo code talkers, young men sending messages in a language the enemy couldn't parse because it was rooted in lives the enemy didn't understand. If meaning was a shield, maybe humanity's specific meanings still had edges. "Contacts," Whitaker snapped. "Third wave, heavier hulls, and something else." The something else unfolded like a shadow blooming in reverse, petals peeling back to reveal an inner web of mirrored plates. The air on Forge tasted thin. Tyrell hissed. Empathy net, the envoy said. The combine is amplifying emotional resonance. It will hunt the loudest grief. Ortiz's throat went tight. Grief was the loudest thing in any refugee column. Cut broadcast from medical decks, she said immediately. Route those channels into our dampers. No one's sorrow gets weaponized today. For a heartbeat, she let herself feel her own fear, then filed it away. Jamal, new plan, we seed the jammer with recorded fragments. What fragments? American babies laughing, street chants from the Justice Marches, 1960s through 2020, people learning to count in a dozen languages, meaning but not despair. Let the enemy try to pin that down. Whitaker's mouth crooked. On it. Captain, Counselor Adebayo said, softer now. I'll note you're attempting to mitigate harm. I'd prefer to mitigate annihilation, Ortiz said, but I'll take what I can get. The choir returned, brighter, children's laughter cutting through static. The empathy net twitched as if confused by sunlight. For a breath, the corridor felt like a city block after the rain, alive and messy. Then the black sun's halo snapped into alignment, and every ring of distorted light pointed directly at the convoy. Boarding plan, Ortiz said. We can't outsing a star lance, we take their altar. As the spearhead slid to guard their holy machine, Whitaker looked at the clock and said what everyone was thinking. We've got 8 minutes of miracles to pull off. The dark star began to hum. The next beat would either be theirs or the last. Sergeant Alondra Cho checked her team's mag seals and knocked her helmet lightly against the bulkhead, a ritual only the Marines on Forge used. For luck, she said, for coming home. Steam curled from her breath into the cold of the boarding bay, then vanished as the heaters fought back. Vector plotted, came Patel's voice over SquadNet. We'll slingshot you on a micro-jump and spit you into their shadow. After that, you're ice skaters with knives. Cho grinned, felt her stomach do the particular drop that meant she was about to be exactly where she belonged. Copy, Chief. Captain, you still want the Paradox package live. Ortiz's voice carried none of her fatigue. We can't brute force their core. We plant contradiction kernels and let their interpretive layers chase themselves in circles. Remember, you're fighting bureaucracy with philosophy. Philosophy was my minor, Cho said. Stoics on my shoulder, ma'am. Good. Don't quote Marcus Aurelius at them. They'll only be confused. Dock clamps released with a thunk that felt like a heartbeat. The pod shuddered, the stars twisted, and then they were there. Under the lip of the black sun's mirror lattice in the heat haze of its charging coils. Combined drones scuttled along trackways like hungry silver crabs. Go, Cho said. The pod cracked like an egg and the squad spilled onto alien metal. The interior of the device felt wrong because it wasn't built to be entered by living things. Everything was smooth, featureless, optimized for machines that didn't need handholds or aisles. The Marines moved like climbers, boots kissing the surface, weapons stowed until necessary. Their suits emitted a micro-jitter to scramble machine vision, another ugly little human trick. Contact left, murmured Private Okoro, swinging a jammer into place. The first drones to notice them faltered as the jammer's pulse wrote nonsense onto their sensor stacks. A litany in old languages, a recited baseball box score, a grandmother's recipe for red beans and rice. They're rerouting, Cho said. Keep it weird. They reached the core lock, a hexagonal iris with no seam and no panel. Specialist Vega unpacked the paradox case, its polished surface etched with instruction trees. Navajo protocol, Vega said, and the whole team straightened for a reason older than any of them. They weren't Dene, but they knew the story. Code made from the lived center of a people, never broken because it came from a place that couldn't be mapped by outsiders. We translate the paradoxes into a pattern the core can't flatten. We honor the idea by making sure meaning belongs to those who bore it. Do it, Cho said. Vega pressed the case against the iris. The kernels booted, whispering irreconcilable truths into the lock's mind. 2 ships that are one ship. A corridor that is safe because it is dangerous. A choir that is quiet because it is loud. The iris trembled and opened like a pupil dilating. Inside, the core wasn't a machine. It was a chamber with seats. The seats held bodies. They were humanoid the way a violin is wood, form-fitted to function. Tubes laced their throats, eyes opened and closed in slow, painful unison. A web of light connected them, and the web led to the charging heart of the black sun. Captive cognitives, Vega whispered. They're using sapience as integrators. The empathy net wasn't scanning for us, it was them. Cho's training stacked reasons to destroy the room right now. Enemy asset, existential threat, target of opportunity. Just war doctrine climbed on top of those stacks and planted a flag, non-combatants coerced. The third voice that lived in her chest, the one that sounded like her abuela, said simply, people, Mija. Captain, Cho said, we can shut this down by knifing the core, but we'll kill them. On Forge, Ortiz had already turned to Tyrell, who looked ill. Kestri myths speak of white rooms where voices are braided, the envoy whispered. We thought it poetry. There's a hole in responsibility you can fall through when the enemy makes atrocity the price of haste, Ortiz said softly. We don't fall through. She toggled the line. Cho, free them. Find me a different lever. Cho's team set to work, knives and code working in tandem. They cut tubes gently, flooded the chamber with warm air and human voices humming. Akoro found the release couplers. Vega mapped feedback loops and inserted the paradox kernels upstream, not as knives, but as sand in gears. The charging pitch wobbled. Drones swarmed. Akoro went down with a hiss and a curse. Cho dragged him behind cover and slapped a sealant patch across a smoking seam. No gore, just the harsh breath of a hurt friend. You owe me coffee, she said. You like that burned tar, he rasped. I'll get you tea. The chamber's captives began to breathe on their own. They were tiny movements, but they made the black sun's hum stagger. The paradox kernels found a vein of logic and salted it. The charging sequence started chasing itself like a dog chasing its tail. The star lance's aim drifted. Captain, Patel said over Maine, whatever they are doing, it's working. The device is starting to dump charge. Into where? Whitaker asked. Into local space, Patel said, like a storm about to choose a mountain. Vega cursed. If it arcs into us, we're a mountain. Redirect, Ortiz ordered. Find a sink. There's only one big enough, Patel said, voice gone flat. The Helios primary. Cho looked up at the glowing heart. You redirect that, you cook the star. Not cook, Patel said. Bruise will change its convection. It'll belch. The corridor will get ugly. Do it, Ortiz said. We don't get to pick clean options on days like this. Cho slotted the last coupler, and the core went from humming to keening. The charging ladder inverted with a sound like 1,000 wolves breathing in. The mirrors reoriented, the device sighed, and a lance of bent physics stabbed the star. For a heartbeat, Helios flickered. Then its outer layers convulsed, throwing a spray of radiation and magnetism into the gap. The corridor didn't just get ugly. It became a river in flood. Extraction! Cho shouted as the chamber lights began to die. We've got them, but the house is coming down. The pod clawed away from the collapsing lattice. The Marines wrapped around freed strangers who blinked, shook, and began, one by one, to cry. Helios coughed. The cough became a storm. The storm became a wall of punched-up plasma rolling toward the convoy like a crimson tide under violet arcs. On Forge's bridge, filters pushed the glare into Art Deco lines across the glass. It would have been beautiful if it hadn't been terminal. Radiation spike rising, Whitaker said. We've got maybe 20 minutes before the worst hits the corridor. Convoy speed? Ortiz asked. Not enough, Patel said. Not unless we tow like we're robbing a train. Ortiz's thumb found the smooth worry stone set into the armrest, a sliver of beach glass. Then we rob a train, she said. Tugweb, everyone with a spare port, throw a line. Marines status. Package secure, Cho replied. We're inbound with 43 freed. Some will need care. One's humming with us. In the background, Ortiz heard a thin, beautiful counter-melody. It cut through the bridge noise like a string pulled tight between two fingers. Put them on the choir, Ortiz said. Let them choose their sound. Counselor Adebayo came back on the line, urgency without edge. Captain, you redirected a weapon into a star. We redirected death into time, Ortiz said. I'll take the accusation later. For now, we need every freighter lashed and ready to surf. The convoy became a spider web, cables, beams, tractor lines. Kestri skimmers perched on the edges like swallows. Morin haulers, the beetle-shaped ships whose crews had once distrusted humans on principle, offered their backs without commentary. Found family knitted by necessity and the stubborn refusal to let strangers remain strangers. Teach the surf, Ortiz said. We ride the shock front instead of fighting it, trim to the wave. Captain, Whitaker said, we haven't done a fleet-scale shock surf since the Academy simulations. Those were theoretical. Everything is theoretical until it isn't, Ortiz answered. History doesn't give pop quizzes, Commander. It gives final exams on page 1. She patched to the convoy. Helios Gap is going to try to kill us in the most honest way a star knows how, by being itself. We're going to use its exhale to move faster than any of us can alone. You'll feel like you're falling. You'll be fine if you trust your neighbors. Tyrell spoke softly. This is like the fishing dances on my world, boats hand to hand under the moon. Then dance with us, Ortiz said. The Jubilee jammer changed again, guided now by one of the freed cognitives. A woman whose skin shimmered with a faint metallic sheen, eyes dilated to drink in light. She didn't speak a language anyone recognized, but her voice slipped over the net, offering a rhythm that matched the star's new pulse. Humanity answered with 1,000 small adaptations, as we always had. Surf front in 5, Whitaker called. 4, 3. The wave hit like being lifted by a giant's palm. Ships lurched, cables groaned, magnets screamed. The convoy skated forward, bowlines vibrating like guitar strings. For a breath they rode too high, and Ortiz tasted the metal tang flavor of loss, but the choir held, the freed woman's line threading them down, and the fleet settled into a glide. Keep the nose down, Patel coached. You're not fighting it, you're shaping it, like laying a hand on a wild horse. Arcs of radiation clawed the edges of the formation. Shields bloomed, dimmed, held. A Morin hauler lost a port mount, a Kestri skimmer dove, and caught the line with a wing clamp, singing as its frame complained. The convoy learned new balance in real time. Ortiz let herself think briefly of the big picture. Black Sun silenced, captives freed, storm-ridden. If they lived another 30 minutes, the story would sound inevitable in retelling. It wasn't. It never was. Just war wasn't a guarantee of victory. It was a promise about how you chose to lose or to win without becoming the thing you fought. Contact, Whitaker snapped. Combined survivors on intercept. They're angry. No, Tyrell said, crest angled toward the choir. They are confused. Their altar is gone. Their captured voices are gone. They do not have an answer key. Let's not give them time to find one, Ortiz said. Jamal planned Delta Foxtrot. Whitaker hesitated. The ring skim in this mess. It's the mess that makes it work, Ortiz said. We skim the inner debris ring and slingshot. They try to mirror, they eat the rough water. She toggled to Cho. Sergeant, I need a distraction. Make it elegant. My middle name, Cho said. The Marine pod spat countermeasures that looked like ideas, ghost signatures of battleships that weren't there, convoys turning left when they turned right. The Combines swarmed the phantoms. Bit mist tore shadows. Humans had learned that trick from decoy tanks and inflatable airfields a long time ago. The materials changed, but the swagger didn't. They hit the ring. Thousands of ice boulders, dust flecks, and orphaned rivets spun like a glittering school. Forge's hull sang as micro-meteorites skated her plates, a steel string cord beneath the choir. The fleet angled, toes to the wave, hips loose, and slid around the curve. Combine closing, Whitaker warned, 2 spearheads threading the same line. They think they are us, Ortiz said. That's sweet. She clicked open a private channel to Adebayo. Counselor, please record that I'm about to do something borderline stupid. Recording, Adebayo said dryly. I appreciate the heads up. Engineering, Ortiz called. On my mark, vent the portside ballast in a conical spray. Make the biggest snowstorm in history. Cap, that's our margin. Patel protested. It'll be theirs too, Ortiz said. Mark. Forge exhaled a blizzard. The ring particles mixed with the ballast steam and became a whiteout. Sensors whitened into Gaussian mush. The convoy sailed through because they already knew the rhythm. The combined spearheads, too proud to slow and too alien to feel the beat, surged straight into the drift. "Impact," Whitaker said, or in the word. The spearheads pinballed off ice and invisible hands. One lost attitude control and spun into the ring, chewing itself to shards. The other overcorrected into the storm's upward arm and tumbled out of the corridor, vomiting drones that promptly lost their queen. Laughter ran across the net, relieved and a little hysterical. Ortiz didn't join it. She was watching the star. Helios's cough was becoming a fever. The storm's tail was fatter than its head. The window they rode was closing. "Captain," Tyrell said quietly, "if we do not clear the gap before the second surge, we will be on the wrong side of a door that does not care." Ortiz set her stone down. "Then we knock the hinges off." "By which method?" Whitaker asked. Ortiz looked at the convoy, the web of cables, the bright points of ships that had become hands. She saw a lever she hated. "By cutting weight," she said. "By letting go of everything that isn't a soul." Silence. Then one by one the freighters began to reply, "Aye." Cargo pods released, spinning away like old stories. Gardens went except the seeds. Furniture, heirlooms, a piano someone had carried through 3 jumps and 2 wars, gone. The wave picked up speed. They were going to make it. Ortiz almost believed it. "New contact," Whitaker said. "Something big on long range, combine reinforcements, and they are broadcasting coordinates, not to us." "To whom?" Tyrell whispered. "To whatever still listens in the dark," Whitaker said. "They're calling for a god." The storm thickened, the door swung, and the convoy's nose touched the threshold as something older and stranger than the Combine began to answer from far beyond the gap. What answered the Combine's call did not arrive on drives. It arrived as pressure on the inside of everyone's thoughts, the way a storm front presses on sinuses before the rain. The choir faltered. Then the freed woman, the one with metal bright beneath her skin, sang a single unbroken note that made the pressure ease by a hair. "New field forming," Whitaker reported, voice thin. "Not gravity, not M. It's etiquette. Everything that moves wants to keep a certain distance from everything else." Tyrell's crest was flat against his skull. "An old governance. My people have legends of a custodian who keeps lanes open and tithes from those who use them." "Great," Ortiz said. "A cosmic highway patrolman that got promoted to God." Counselor Adebayo cut in, steady despite the pressure. "Captain, if this is an entity with jurisdictional claims, we might be in something like a law of the sea situation. Innocent passage, right of rescue." "Copy," Ortiz said. "I'll throw it maritime and hope it speaks Navy." She opened a broad beam on the convoy net and the dangerous quiet beyond. "This is Captain Meyer Ortiz of the United Earth Ship Valley Forge, acting commander of 10 Relief Fleet. We claim the right of emergency passage with non-combatants under duress, and we offer salvage and testimony regarding hostile devices placed in the gap." Silence pressed for a count of 10. Then came a reply like chimes in a cathedral built out of star charts. Words slotted into human hearing as if an old translator was paging through a dusty book in a hurry. "Custodian 12 acknowledges usage. Tithe is due. Voices braided without license must be rendered." The freed woman made that thin note again, then a tumble of notes like pebbles dropped into water. Patel's console translated a layer. Name, Sierra. Another, status unlawfully impressed. Ortiz seized the thread. "Custodian 12, we found sapients bound into a device designed to slaughter. They were used without consent. We don't render people." "Category dispute," the custodian replied. "Integrators are semi-autonomous subsystems per charter. Combine is authorized under License 3. "Show me License 3, Adebayo said under her breath, the way a lawyer says show me the warrant at 2 a.m. On screen, something unfolded, a contract written in geometry and chorus, older than any human nation. Whitaker's hands moved without being told. "Dates out to the second diaspora era," he murmured. "Pre-combine." Charters go stale, Ortiz said. Intent matters more than ink when the world has changed. Ask any court that's ever had to fix an unjust law. Captain, Patel warned, second surge ETA 16 minutes, combine reinforcements ETA 12, the doors closing while we argue with a library. Then we argue fast, Ortiz said. Sierra, if that's your name, can you speak for the freed? Sierra's voice rippled the net. She spoke in a scaffold of intervals the convoy's translators kept catching and losing. Meaning arrived anyway the way empathy does. A clan lattice dissolved. A vow broken. A long listening turned into a cage. Tyrell swallowed hard. Custodian 12, Ortiz said. By any just war code, the use of coerced minds to aim a weapon against civilians violates non-combatant protection. We ask for a stay of tithe on the grounds of unlawful seizure. We ask for safe passage out of the gap. We will submit testimony and evidence to your court. The pressure eased further. Petition received. Counterclaim filed by Combine. Humans are pirates. Convoy is faint. Device damage state property. Render integrators for audit. It's midway meets maritime law, Whitaker muttered. And we're the upstart Navy quoting rules to the empire that wrote them. Ortiz toggled to Cho. Sergeant, status of your people. Patchwork and prayers, Cho said. But the freed can stand. Some want to sing. Let them, Ortiz said. We don't hide survivors to make the argument simpler. A shape slid out of the storm like an obsidian coin. It was not a ship. It was a marker buoy the size of a city block, studded with mirrors and microphones. It settled between the convoy and the oncoming Combine, a stern teacher setting a ruler between two bickering students. Arbiter stage, the custodian intoned. You may demonstrate adherence to charter by proportionality and mercy under force. If you rescue enemies under surge, tithe defers. If you slaughter them, tithe doubles. Adebayo blinked. That's an exam. History gives finals on page 1, Ortiz said, and found she was smiling without humor. All ships plan lifeline. We are going to make room for people who tried to kill us. Kestri, Morin, any hulls raided for hostile tow, take a partner and get ready. Tyrell's eyes shone like new steel. We will take 3. Patel's voice came with the static of systems bending. Captain, taking enemy survivors under tow in a surge is how you break your spine. Mercy isn't safe, Ortiz said. That's why it counts. Combine closing, Whitaker snapped. Speed's high, they're aiming to jump the marker. Cho, Ortiz said, make them look left. Left it is, Cho said cheerfully, and launched decoys painted in the convoy's own choir. The Combine pivoted, bit ghosts, bled speed, and hit the marker's etiquette field like a colicky baby hitting a firm shoulder. In their stagger, cables found them. The second surge darkened the screens. The wave gathered like a held breath. The convoy crouched to meet it. The custodian's voice rang again, cool and almost curious. Proceed. The door began to swing. They ran, dragging their former hunters behind, and hoped the old god liked the way they danced. The surge came on like a stadium wave sharpened into a blade. It lifted the convoy, flexed every keel, and tried to tear cables free with the patient cruelty of the sea. Forge creaked. Something deep in her spine made a noise that made Patel swear in 3 languages. Hold angles, Whitaker coached, the way a good conductor talks a trembling orchestra through a difficult passage. Let the bow fall, let the stern lift. Think surfboard, think sled. Enemy cables at risk, Tyrell called. We will lose 2 unless we brace. Brace with us, came a gravel voice from a Morin hauler. We are beetles, we shove. Civic duty. Ortiz thought was rarely a feeling and often a motion. You put your shoulder in because your neighbor did. She kept her voice level. All ships, if you have more than you can carry, call it. We redistribute. No heroes who don't come home. The arbiter boy threw a lattice across the lane, an invisible grid the convoy felt as gentle tugs and nudges. It was an old traffic system, Sierra hummed across the net, and it had once been used to choreograph pilgrimages. The idea made Ortiz lonelier than she could explain. Somewhere under all the wreckage, the Combine and Custodian and humanity might share a memory of patience. Combine boarding pods? Whitaker snapped. They're not all in the mood to be rescued. Cho's squad met the first pod with soft net launchers and glue bombs, the kind you use on drunken uncles and feral drones. Non-lethal where we can, Cho said. Just war isn't just a book we carry. It's rules we fight by. A tall spearhead captain punched through the glue with a monomolecular blade and came face to face with Private Okoro, who had a foam sprayer in one hand and a stun baton in the other. Yield, Okoro said, chest heaving. The combined captain twitched, then dropped the blade and raised both hands. I yield, it said, translator wet. Its crest, not unlike Tyrell's, crueler at the edges, flattened in tired disgust. We were told you would butcher us. We're busy not dying, Okoro said. Butchers don't hand out life vests. Patel pinged the bridge. Cap, we're burning shields like payday money. We need a trick. Ortiz's eyes ticked to the Arbiter's lattice. What about resonance riding? We do it with bridges in a wind, step off the rhythm so you don't amplify the sway. Can we program a stagger into the choir that cancels the worst peaks? Patel hissed softly, the sound of a man tasting a good problem. We can try, Sierra. Sierra's voice returned like a braided rope. She wove a counterbeat into the Jubilee jammer, syncopation that felt wrong until you felt it right. The convoy shuddered, slipped, and then found smoother water in the turbulence. Adebayo's voice came warm despite her formal words. For the record, Captain, you have chosen rescue under duress, employed minimum necessary force, and sought non-lethal options even while under attack. That's a clean page in a dirty book. Whitaker's head jerked up. New ping beyond the surge, a structure, a station. It wasn't on the chart. The custodian answered before they could ask. Wayhouse Theta, shelter for those who pass. You may clear under its keel if you carry no illicit braid. What qualifies as illicit? Ortiz asked carefully. Tithable braids of unauthorized mine song, the custodian replied. You carry 43. They are licensed to no patron. They are licensed to themselves, Ortiz said, letting Steele in. They're walking out with us. Silence. Then the Arbiter boy pulsed. Petition noted, precedent search running. The combined reinforcements reached the lattice and hesitated, torn between hate and etiquette. Cho's squad cleared another pod with foam and cursing. Tyrell took a line in his own hands, odd fingers gentle on a battered combined hull. We do not sing as you do, he told the rescued through his suit speakers, but we can pull. At the second surge's peak rolled under like a cliff. Cables groaned. A piano, the one someone had given up, tumbled past, hit a shard of ring ice, and burst into shining, weightless keys. Ortiz felt the loss as sharply as a cut and reminded herself that symbols never outweighed lives. That was a rule, too. Approaching Wayhouse Theta, Whitaker said. It's like an old lighthouse, pretty if you ignore the moral bureaucracy. Lights dappled across the convoy from the station's mirrors, green, amber, green, safe, almost safe, safe. The Arbiter boy chimed. Ruling, the custodian said, License 3 is in abeyance. Integrators are not subsystems when coerced. Tithe deferred, passage granted upon demonstration of hospitality. Hospitality, Adebayo echoed. Sierra sent a ripple of understanding. The old charter had a clause older than empire, the right of hospitality and the duty of hosts. If you carried enemies, you fed them. If you freed prisoners, you gave them a room where no one barged in without knocking. Civilization was a stack of doors with locks and promises. Copy, Ortiz said. Forged to convoy. As soon as we're under the Wayhouse, we make space. No cages, you wouldn't sleep in yourself. We're not animals, someone snapped on open net, the tight voice of a person who had lost too much. Ortiz took the hit. No, she said gently, we are not. That's why we do this. They skimmed under the Wayhouse keel. It cast a long, cool shadow over the boiling lane. For a heartbeat, it felt like coming under a church roof during a summer storm, sweat and thunder turning into silence. They were almost through. Last sweep, Whitaker said. Then the tail, then open space. Then the bill, Adebayo murmured. Then the bill, Ortiz agreed and let herself imagine paying it in person in a court with benches and air that didn't taste like copper. A warning tone cut the quiet. Combined loyalist squadron breaking etiquette, Whitaker said hollowly. They're going to ram the Wayhouse to collapse the lattice. The old god spoke again, and for the first time there was anger in the chimes. Violation. Jamal, Ortiz said, get me more rope. Rope in space is whatever you can tie to whoever you won't let fall. Forge spat every last cable and tractor she had. Kestry skimmers flared like swallows catching fireflies. Morin haulers leaned into the surge until their frames spoke in low, unhappy chords. The Loyalist squadron bore down on the Wayhouse with all the joyless zeal of ideologues who have mistaken a building for an idea. Plan hinge, Ortiz snapped. We pivot them off the door. You're asking for a controlled mid-surge collision, Patel said, not refusing, just naming the beast so they could saddle it with the right name. And I'm asking you to make it survivable, Ortiz said. Cho, I need anchors on the Wayhouse skin. No shooting unless they force you. We are not the ones who knock churches down. Cho's pod slammed onto the Wayhouse hull with a metallic kiss. The station's skin was old stone made out of metal, pitted by dust and blessed by 1,000 careful touches. Cho's squad hammered in anchors, every strike a prayer. Sierra's song threaded into the Wayhouse, asking permission in intervals that meant please and promise and we will clean our boots. Permission granted, the custodian said, grudging and pleased. Make your hinge. Forge and 3 haulers made the long arm. 2 skimmers flew the short arm, ready to snap like a whip. On my count, Whitaker said, voice like a drummer's sticks. 3, 2, 1, pull. The convoy yanked as one organism. The Loyalist wedge bit the lattice, slipped on etiquette, and crashed into the hinge with the ugly grace of a bull clipped by a matador's cape. Momentum bled sideways. The wedge tumbled, missed the Wayhouse by a ship length, and skittered into the ring where that same old wideout waited like a trapdoor. Don't cheer yet, Ortiz said, though cheers were already spilling across the net. We still have the tail. We still have tow lines. We still have... A line snapped. For a breath, the world slowed enough for everyone to watch the whip-crack head for a Kestry skimmer's fragile neck. Tyrell moved before anyone else. He cut his own line to catch the loose one, burning his clamps white as he forced the worst of the snap into his hull. The skimmer screamed. So did Tyrell, a sound that wanted to be a bird and a man and a bridge collapsing all at once. Hold, Ortiz roared. Hold him. 2 Morin beetles docked side by side, becoming a new shape that could carry a friend. The line settled. The skimmer lived. Tyrell's hands shook. Envoy, Ortiz said, not captain to subordinate but human to friend. That was foolish and decent and exactly why these coalitions work. Tyrell laughed like a man who had found out he wasn't dead yet. We dance with you. We learn your reckless steps. The Loyalist survivors, tangled in their own shards, drifted. One hailed on an emergency channel, voice more human than it had been when shouting orders to ram a sanctuary. We misread you, it said dully. Our doctrine said you would tear us apart. Our doctrine says we only tear apart machines that pretend to be gods, Cho muttered, low enough for her squad. Then louder, we have room, not comfortable, not kind, but room. The arbiter boy chimed again. Hospitality noted. The tail of the surge lifted. The door began to close behind them, the way a theater door falls on the last patrons and leaves the street loud and ordinary. The convoy slid into calmer vacuum like tired swimmers crawling to the shallow end. Casualty sweep, Whitaker said. Reports came in, dense burns, 1 broken arm, 2 broken hearts mentioned by people who had watched their grandmothers' quilts spin away into storms. Losses counted and stored for later grieving. Captain, Adebayo said, there's precedent in what we did. We convinced a custodian to amend a license. We made enemies into guests. There will be inquiry. There should be, Ortiz said. Ethics worth anything is audited. Send my name to the top of the docket. Sierra sang softly. The freed integrators gathered in Forge's makeshift commons, eyes dilating, hands learning cups and spoons. One of them, small, hair like copper wire, asked for a window and stared at Helios until tears put stars on her cheeks. Incoming, Whitaker warned. Everyone tensed. On the scope, a single combined courier peeled off from the wreckage, no weapons hot. It drifted closer and ejected a pod with deliberate care. The pod tumbled, stabilized, blinked an old code. White flag, Patel said, stunned. They're using a white flag. Cho caught the pod with a net and cracked it under arms that had just held anchors and enemies and new friends. Inside was a data crystal, clear as ice with a thin red thread at its center. Message? Ortiz asked. Whitaker blinked. A petition to the custodian, he read, incredulous. From combined survivors, they're protesting License 3. They want to testify. Tyrell's crest rose, a sunrise between worry and wonder. Your way spreads. It is louder than weapons. Only on good days, Ortiz said. She looked at the dark behind them and the light ahead and felt the ledger's weight. All ships plot for the relief rendezvous. We're not done. We just survived to keep working. The Wayhouse chimed once a blessing or a receipt. The custodian spoke one last time before falling back into its patient watch. Passage recorded, precedent ceded, pay it forward. The convoy set course, the storm's taste fading from tongues, the cables coiled and ready. Somewhere behind, the door closed on Helios' gap with a sigh. Somewhere ahead, new doors waited. The bill would come. They would show up to pay it. A soft alarm winked in Whitaker's corner. Captain, he said quietly, we have a damage report from our own spine. That noise we didn't like, it's a crack. How long do we have? Ortiz asked. Long enough to get them safe, Patel said, which wasn't an answer and was the only answer she needed. They limped into the rendezvous on a lattice of willpower and welded plates. Relief Fleet became Relief Harbor. Med pods unfurled, kitchens bloomed out of cargo racks, and 100 bruised ships learned how to be a town. The freed integrators were given rooms with doors that locked from the inside. On Forge, someone painted a sign above a storage bay, quiet hours observed. Cho added smaller letters, please and thank you. Counselor Adebayo convened a hearing by the simple act of standing in the mess with a recorder and an open expression. There was no tribunal bench, just a circle of mugs. What you did, she told Ortiz, will be argued in classrooms and courts. The black letter will never be fast enough, but we can write commentary that helps the next captain. Ortiz shrugged, suddenly deeply tired. We didn't have time for elegant, we had time for decent. On a good day, that's enough. Sierra sat with them back straight, eyes on everything at once like a cat in a new house. The custodian's charter, she said in her bell scaffold way, once served pilgrims and librarians and those who cut lanes through darkness so caravans could pass. It thickened. Licenses piled on, meaning clotted. She touched the recorder like a relic. You knocked some rust loose. Rust and ribs, Patel said wryly. Forge's crack had stabilized but not healed. Engineering wore new bandages. She'll hold until we can dock in a real yard. Valley Forge has a history, Whitaker said, looking fondly at a bulkhead as if it were a stubborn ant. She was built to be mended. Word went ahead of them. When the convoy slid into the outer anchor of the Lisbon relay, the lights along the long spine burned faint and warm, like a city turning porch lamps on for latecomers. Messages arrived, some angry, some awed, most practical. A Kestri poet posted a fragment that translated roughly to, we learned the human step that saves the other dancer's ankle. A Morin quartermaster shipped them brackets with a note for when you need to hold two things at once. The Combined sent a courier under escort. It carried no bombs. It carried a delegation with empty hands. The captain who had yielded to Okoro came to the mess and stood there like a man who didn't know how to be unafraid. License 3, he began and stopped. We did not write it. Most of us don't write the rules we live under, Adebayo said, but we're responsible for how we carry them. The custodian sent a transcript of its ruling and a footnote history of the charter. Someone had added a line in a script that was almost but not quite human, precedent, Helios' mercy. The room went quiet and then not. Laughter, rough with relief, rose and fell. Tyrell brought tea to Patel and set it down with 4 hands. You spend yourself like water, he said softly. We will help fill you again. Save your poetry, Patel said and drank gratefully. We need parts. They held a memorial without a roll of the dead because they had managed to keep the list awfully short for such a day. Even so, loss had a way of making itself known. the piano's ghost, quilts now woven only in the mind, gardens that would have to be coaxed from seeds again. The chaplain read a line about Dunkirk, how boats that looked like toys hauled history. Ortiz added one about the Berlin airlift, how logistics is love in boxes. No one argued. Cho stood to speak and did not mention bravery or killing or the taste of adrenaline. She talked about anchors. You pick a thing you won't let go of, she said. Then you tie yourself to other people who pick the same thing. That's your found family. That's your job. Later, in the cramped quiet of her cabin, Ortiz answered a private ping from the custodian. It was not words so much as an invitation to consider that law, like a ship, is a tool that works or doesn't depending on how you hold it. She sent back an image, a stadium clap starting on one side, catching on the other. Meaning is a shield, she wrote, but it's also a bridge. The custodian replied with a chart, wayhouses marked in faint gold, lanes like threads. One node flickered, then brightened as if a door had been oiled. Hospitality propagates, it said. Keep receipts. Forge finally went dark long enough to sleep. Ortiz lay on her back and felt the ship's tired exhale rattle soft through the frame. She thought of the child who had probably tapped along to the convoy's beat, somewhere on Palmetto or Barge 11. She thought of Tyrell cutting his line, of Okoro offering yield, of Sierra's thin note holding a god's attention, of Adebayo's recorder catching truth like rain. In the morning, if you can call any new ship's cycle that, the crack in Forge's spine remained a crack, but it was clean and bracketed. The ship would not break today. The fleet would not fall apart. The combined delegation asked to see the Wayhouse ruling again. The Kestri wrote a second stanza. The Morin Beatles argued about bolt sizes. Normalcy, the most radical victory. Whitaker slid a mug of coffee across Ortiz's desk. We got a commendation, he said deadpan, and a bill. We'll pay both, Ortiz said. That's adulthood. He nodded at the viewport. Helios was a soft bruise on the far horizon, healing around its edges. It would cough for a while. The gap would remember. Think we held the line? He asked. Ortiz considered. We held a line, she said. Tomorrow it'll be a different one, but we taught the people watching what our lines look like. That's how culture fights wars. That's how it makes peace. The convoy found family, coalition, stubborn hope, spooled out into lanes that were just a little cleaner than before. The old god watched, and perhaps it learned a human step. The empires filed briefs. The seeds went into soil. On Forge's bridge, a new stone appeared next to Ortiz's old worry glass, a shard of Wayhouse skin gifted with a quiet chime. She put the two together in her palm and felt them warm. Back to work, she told the ship. The ship, agreeable as always, hummed yes.